So this is a flower. To me, it reminds me of a daisy, but I wonder if it might remind you of something different. And you can see it's kind of a three-dimensional craft, 3D, whoops, because the petals curl up. So when you see it in person, it really draws your eye because there's all these different curling petals. So I thought I would show you all how I made this craft today. And another reason that I really like this craft is because it uses materials that you probably have around your house. And you all know that I love crafts that make you use what you have. And so today I am using a paper plate to make this project. And it's just the most basic kind of paper plate you can get. There's no wax coating on it or anything, just plain old paper plate. And for my flower, I used more than one. So I used 4 for this example, but I'm going to show you how you can make it with 3. And you can kind of do it however you would like. So you could use 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 paper plates, depending on what you have at your house. Of course, you don't want to use all of the paper plates at your house, but I bet you can spare 1 or 2 to make a beautiful flower. So I'm using paper plates. And the only other things you need, there's something to attach. So I have a glue stick today, but tape would work also. And then I'm going to use a little bit of colored paper and a pencil. That's it. So let me show you how I made this fun daisy. And this is something I think would look so nice in your springtime window or on your table. A really fun decoration to have around the house to remind you that it's spring, even when the weather sometimes doesn't feel like it. So what you are going to do for this project is use 1 paper plate or more to create flowers. So I, ahead of time, made a couple examples of how I cut a paper plate into a flower. So this is one that's bigger or one that's smaller. Let me show you how I did it. So I took my paper plate and I'm going to draw the shape of a flower using pencil on my paper plate. And I would suggest starting with your biggest flower. That's the one that's gonna go on the bottom, on the outside. So I'm gonna make my biggest flower by drawing a flower on this paper plate. And I'm going to hope that you'll be able to see my pencil marks, and I'm not quite sure whether or not you will. Let me put a couple more plates behind so I can hold up my plate while I'm drawing it. Now this flower does not need to be just perfect. Every petal can be different and that's fine. So I'm going to kind of start one petal and go all the way to the edge and keep going around that way. Are you able to see? Keep going around that way, making each of my petals until I get back to the first one where I started. Now, like I said, these do not need to be perfect. There is no such thing as a flower with all the petals the same exact size. All the things in nature grow a little different. So you can see I drew a flower going all the way around my plate. My next step is to cut out my flower. So I'm going to use scissors. And this part, because paper plates are a little bit thicker than regular computer paper or coloring paper, might be a little tricky. So this might be a step that you would like to ask a grown-up to help you out with. Or if you're an older friend, this might not be tricky for you. You'll have to try it and see. So I'm going to cut each of my petals around my plate, following my pencil line. So I'm going to try to do that quickly so you all don't need to watch me for too long cutting. I'm going around and around. I am halfway there. It looks like a logo for a store or a fruit basket or something. Keep going. Your flower can have as many petals as you decide. That's up to you. There's no right or wrong number of petals to make. So you could choose a flower that only has a couple of petals. You could do kind of a medium number like I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did 8 petals on mine for this example, but you could do 4, you could do 8, or you could even do lots and lots of petals all around your flower. That part is totally up to you. All right, I'm gonna clear off my scraps so I still have space to work. And now I have my flower that I drew all cut out on my plate, and you can see that this one went all the way to the edge of those kind of wavy lines on the side of the plate. So this is my biggest flower. What I'm going to do next is, if I were starting from scratch, I would do maybe one more flower or as many as I wanted to layer on. So for my example, I'm going to use the ones I already cut. That way you don't have to watch me cut out a paper plate flower quite so many times. But if you are doing this at home, you would follow the exact same steps to make another flower, but you'll see it's a little smaller. I didn't go all the way to the edge of the plate. Instead, I drew it kind of in the middle and cut it out that way so that it's smaller than the one that drew the petals all the way to the edge. Does that make sense? I hope so. So I did one really big flower, and then I'm doing another one that's smaller, and you could do that to have 2 layers, which I think is what I'll show you here. But if you wanted, you could add another even smaller, so you'd have a small, medium, and large. That's what I did in my first example. But I think for this example, I'll show you using 2 layers, just in case you decide to try it that way. So I have my paper plate flowers. And now what I'm going to do, if I were going to layer these right now, it doesn't really look that interesting because they're very flat. So I'm going to show you a trick that I have to make this flower look really interesting. Here we go. So you take your flower, and then I'm taking, you could use like a pencil or a pen or a marker, something like that that's kind of round and thin. I'm going to take it, and let me show you here. This part is really fun because it really makes your flower pop. I'm going to take the cap off of my pen so it doesn't get in my way. And then I'm going to take my fingers on one petal, my hand with my pen, and I'm going to curl my petal around my pen and then lift it up. And you can see it kind of curves the edge of my petal. And now I'm just going to go around each of my petals and do the same thing. See, I kind of wrap it around and then take it out, and it curves the petal. So now I've done 2. I have a couple more to do. Curling it around, and then I kind of rotate the flower in my hand so that the one I'm working with is on top. You can see it starting to make a nice effect now that I've done quite a few. So I'm going to keep going. Curling. I wanted to say also that I'm doing this on a plain white paper plate, and I like that because it kind of turns out like a daisy. But you could also, if you wanted to make a different looking flower or something a little more unique, you could watercolor on your plate before you even cut it out. And then you'd have a very colorful flower, which will be different than mine that is very white. You can see I curled all the petals around the pen, so they're sticking up. I'm going to do it one more time on my middle-sized flower. So I'm going to do the same thing, taking my pen, and I just kind of fold the tip over and wrap it around and then take it out. It's really, really simple. I don't have to press hard or anything. I'm just kind of slowly curving the petals. And also, if you don't have a pen laying around that you can do this with, or if you find that part to be a little tricky, you can also just use your fingers to kind of fold the edge of the flower, and that will work just as well. I actually find the pen to be a little easier than that, so that's why I do it this way, but folding it would work just fine. That's how I did it on my example for some of the petals, and you can't even tell a difference. So now that I've curved these petals and these petals, I am going to layer them on and stick them together. So you could use tape to do this. I have a glue stick today because a lot of my examples usually use tape, so I thought I should try to use a glue stick and save some tape. So I'm going to put a little dot of glue on the back of my middle petal. You really don't need too much. And I'm going to stick it on to the bigger one, right in the middle. And you can kind of tell once, I don't know if it shows as much on video. Yeah, you can see the curved petals fit inside the outside curved petals to make kind of a layered petal design. Now you could add even more, and I have a little example of a smaller one that I cut out, so I guess I'll add it in. So I'll go back and curve those edges the same way, rolling around the pen. Rolling. This little one only had 5 petals, so this part's going to go very quick. I'm rolling, last petal. Kind of curvy and bumpy now. And you can tell this one had all different size petals. That works. I'm going to do the same thing by adding glue and sticking it in the middle. Now, you could stop here. That's really interesting, but I like the look of having a little circle in the middle, so I'm using construction paper. I had yellow at my house. I had a little scrap I could use. Well, it matches my shirt. But you could use any color that you want or have, and if you don't have construction paper, another thing you could do is use a marker to draw the circle in the middle, which would be beautiful. I'm going to add the circle by doing the same steps, adding a little bit of glue on the back and sticking it into the very center. Woo! So there you can see it already looks like a daisy to me. The last thing I'm going to add is a leaf, just because I think it would look nice. So I'm going to cut a leaf shape out of some green paper, and this is actually some scrap green paper that I had left over from my Palm Sunday craft. So that's why you always save your scraps, because you never know when they'll come in handy. I'm adding it on with glue, a little bit of glue. I'm going to add it to the back, just sticking out a little bit. And I'm going to add one more so the leaf is not lonely. Cutting a leaf shape. Add it on the same way with a little bit of glue, or you might be using tape, which would work just as well. I stick it on, and there you go. So my flower, I think, looks like a daisy, but if you were going to make one and decided to paint or color your paper plates before you started, I wonder which one color you would choose. You could have a whole different garden of all color flowers. It would be really interesting to see what everybody's unique flower turned out to be. So this is a little daisy that I think would look so happy in my window, and now I have a couple, and I might even make a couple of more. And I think it's really fun. You can see on this one I added a few more details. In the center I drew some dots. On the leaves I drew some like lines and veins in the leaf. So I might go back and do that here as well. But that part is all up to you. You can get creative with how you decorate your leaves and your flower. I hope if you try this you'll take a picture and show me, because I would love to see everybody's different flowers around their houses.